I get goosebumps all over my body. I have never ever seen anything like that.
In the cold, dark waters between Sweden and Finland, something has been sitting on the ocean floor for longer than anyone can explain. It's roughly 60 meters wide. It has sharp, geometric edges. And behind it, stretching for nearly 300 meters, is a trench so straight and so clean that it looks like a runway. For over a decade, scientists, divers, and explorers have tried to explain what it is. Some say it's just an unusual rock formation. Others say it's the remains of an ancient civilization. And then there are those who believe something far more disturbing. That this is not from Earth at all. An alien craft, a machine, or something humanity was never meant to find. The object was discovered completely by accident in 2011. Since then, teams have gone back again and again, running new scans, collecting new samples, and recording new data. And no one has been able to fully explain what it is. But now, after years of searching, scientists have examined all the available evidence. And what the evidence reveals is far darker and far more terrifying than anyone imagined. So what exactly is this strange object? Let's get to the bottom of it. A routine day. Dennis Osberg and Peter Lindberg had set out that day looking for old shipwrecks. Instead, they found something that left even experienced explorers wondering what they were looking at. It all started like any other job. Lindberg and Osberg ran a small company called Oceanic Team. Their work was simple: search the Baltic Sea for shipwrecks, document what they found, and sometimes recover valuable cargo from the wrecks. The Baltic Sea is one of the best places in the world for this kind of work. The water is cold, and it contains very little salt. Those conditions slow the growth of bacteria, fungi, and shipworms that normally break down wood. As a result, ships that sank hundreds of years ago can still be found almost completely intact on the seafloor. So, in June 2011, Lindberg and Osberg took their vessel about 300 kilometers from Stockholm into international waters in search of something valuable. After reaching their destination, the team began scanning the seafloor with side-scan sonar. This type of sonar differs from normal sonar in that it doesn't just tell you how deep the water is. It sends sound waves out to both sides of the vessel. Those waves bounce off the seafloor and any objects lying on it. By measuring the returning echoes, a computer builds a detailed picture of what's below. The day started as usual. Their ship slowly scanned a wide stretch of the seafloor while the team watched the sonar images appear on the screen. For hours, they saw nothing unusual, just rocks, ridges, patches of sediment, and other natural features. It looked like another routine survey. But then something appeared on the screen that didn't match any of them. The object was almost perfectly circular. It measured about 60 meters across. Instead of blending naturally into the surrounding seabed, it seemed to have defined edges and geometric features that immediately caught their attention. And what made it more shocking was that, behind the object, stretching back across the seafloor, was something else entirely. A long trench, nearly 300 meters in length. It looked like something had been dragged across the ocean floor and come to rest exactly where the sonar had found the disc-shaped object. The Oceanic team had spent years studying sonar scans from the seafloor. They had seen thousands of natural rock formations, but none of them looked like this. So everyone thought maybe the sonar was fooling them. Acoustic shadows, strange rock formations, and equipment quirks can sometimes make ordinary features appear artificial. So they marked the location and continued with the survey. But they couldn't stop thinking about what they had seen. Before leaving, the team made one decision. They would come back and investigate it properly. The investigation. Months after the initial discovery, the Oceanic team returned to the same site. But unlike the last time, They came prepared. They brought better equipment and scanned the site multiple times from different directions. But no matter what they did, every pass over that area showed the same thing. The strange object was still there, in that exact place. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a software error. It was a real object resting on the seafloor. And it wasn't alone. Behind that object was the same long trench they had seen months earlier. That was the first anomaly. Because, normally, the seafloor doesn't stay the same for very long. The Baltic Sea has currents that slowly move sand and sediment across the bottom. Tiny marine organisms constantly disturb the surface. These natural processes gradually soften sharp features and bury old marks. If the trench had been there for a long time, it should have started to fade, but it hadn't. Its edges were still sharp. It looked almost fresh, as if it hadn't been slowly covered by sediment the way scientists would normally expect. And no one knew why. But the trench wasn't the only anomaly. The second anomaly was the location itself. As researchers took a closer look at the location, the discovery became even harder to explain. The Baltic Sea is one of the most geologically stable places on Earth. There are no active volcanoes beneath it. There are no major fault lines nearby. The bedrock rarely changes. Volker Bruchert, a geologist at Stockholm University who reviewed the early data from the discovery, noted that the object did not match the characteristics of typical glacial deposits. Glacial deposits are irregular. They are dropped randomly as ice melts. They do not create straight trenches behind them. The team then shared the sonar images with other geologists and specialists, hoping someone could identify the object. They compared it with known rock formations, glacial deposits, and underwater geological features, but they couldn't tell what it really was. By that point, the team had taken the investigation as far as they could from above the water. If they wanted real answers, there was only one option left. They would have to go down themselves and see the object with their own eyes. What divers saw? Getting to the object wasn't going to be easy. It was lying nearly 90 meters below the surface, and normal divers can't casually swim down there. At that depth, the water pressure is almost 10 times greater than it is at the surface. To make matters worse, the water temperature is only about 2 degrees Celsius, just above freezing. And no sunlight reaches that depth, so visibility is extremely poor. On top of that, you can't go down there with ordinary diving equipment. Divers have to breathe specialized gas mixtures to avoid dangerous conditions like nitrogen narcosis and oxygen toxicity. Even then, they can only spend a few minutes on the sea floor. Despite the risks, the oceanic team assembled a dive team and decided to go anyway. They descended through the cold, dark water, guided mostly by their instruments. The only light came from the beams on their diving equipment. And then, after a few minutes, they finally reached the sea floor. As the team swept their lights across the darkness, the object slowly appeared, and it was enormous, about 60 meters across and rising several meters above the surrounding seafloor, almost exactly as the sonar images had shown. But seeing it up close only raised more questions. The surface wasn't covered in mud or soft sediment as the team expected. Instead, it felt hard. In several places, the divers said it even looked as though it had been burned. Then they noticed something even stranger: the shape itself. Instead of the uneven curves and rough surfaces usually found in underwater rock formations, the divers said the object appeared to have straight walls, sharp right angles, and narrow channels or corridors cut into its surface. And there was one feature that stood out more than anything else. Near the top of the object was a circular opening surrounded by a raised square rim. The more the team looked, the harder the object became to explain as an ordinary natural formation. Whatever it was, it didn't resemble anything the team had seen before. Its features looked more like those of an engineered structure than a natural rock formation. But appearances alone couldn't tell what it really was. If the team wanted real answers, they needed to know what the object was made of. So, before leaving, the divers collected several rock samples from its surface and brought them back to the ship. And soon, those samples would become the most important pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. The samples analysis. The samples were then sent to a geology laboratory at Stockholm University for analysis. There, they were examined by Volker Bruckert, an associate professor of geology. But the results didn't seem to make sense. The samples were found to contain basalt, a type of volcanic rock. Now, that immediately raised a problem. The northern Baltic Sea isn't known for active volcanoes. In fact, the nearest volcanic regions are hundreds of kilometers away. So, finding volcanic rock at this location was difficult to explain. And that wasn't the only surprise. The material also showed signs that it had once been exposed to extremely high temperatures before cooling rapidly. That kind of heating can leave behind a distinctive crystalline structure that geologists often associate with volcanic activity or other intense thermal events. But that brought researchers back to the same question. There was no known volcanic eruption here, no lava flow, no nearby heat source that could easily explain why the material looked the way it did. So how had volcanic rock ended up on a seafloor with no volcanic history? If the object was natural, what process had created it? And if it was artificial, what had it originally been made of? And what had transformed it into stone? One possible explanation was a meteorite impact. At first, the idea seemed reasonable. A meteorite racing through Earth's atmosphere and crashing into the Baltic Sea could generate enormous amounts of heat. It might even explain the long trench stretching behind the object. But the theory quickly ran into problems. Meteorite impacts don't leave behind structured remains. They leave craters. They scatter debris. They produce melted glass and widespread destruction. The Baltic Sea anomaly showed none of those characteristics. Instead, divers had reported straight walls, sharp angles, and what appeared to be narrow corridors cut into its surface. Whatever this object was, it hadn't been shattered by a violent impact. It had retained its overall structure. A meteorite could explain the heat. It couldn't explain the geometry. And it couldn't explain the one big problem the oceanic team experienced every time they went near the object: the strange behavior of electronics. According to multiple accounts from the oceanic team, electronic devices began malfunctioning whenever they got close to the object. Satellite phones reportedly stopped working within about 200 meters of the site. Sonar systems that had been working perfectly only minutes earlier suddenly produced nothing but white noise. Navigation equipment glitched. Even cameras reportedly malfunctioned. At first, it might have sounded like bad luck, but then it happened again and again. Different expeditions, different crews, different years, yet the reports were remarkably similar. According to those involved, the devices worked normally everywhere else. But as soon as the vessels approached the anomaly, the problems began. And once they moved away, the equipment started working again. The crews eventually gave the area a nickname. They called it the Dead Zone. That only raised an even bigger question. How could an object sitting quietly on the seafloor interfere with electronic equipment? Ordinary rocks don't block satellite phones. They don't cause sonar systems to fill with static. And they don't normally create a pattern of equipment failures within roughly the same 200-meter radius across multiple expeditions. If the reports were accurate, then the object wasn't simply sitting there. Something about it appeared to be interacting with its surroundings, or at least that was how the crews interpreted what they experienced. Not everyone agrees with that conclusion. Some geologists and skeptics have argued that the Baltic Sea itself could explain at least some of the problems. The water is unusually cold and has unique chemical properties. Combined with the depth and challenging underwater conditions, those factors could potentially interfere with certain equipment without the object itself being responsible. Others have also pointed out that electronic equipment can sometimes fail unexpectedly in harsh marine environments. Salt water, pressure, cold temperatures, and technical faults can all affect sensitive instruments. Because of that, some researchers believe the reported malfunctions may have been coincidental rather than caused by the object itself. But the divers who were there remain unconvinced. Many of them had spent years working in the Baltic Sea. They had explored dozens of dive sites at similar depths without experiencing the same pattern of repeated equipment failures. To them, this location felt different. However, so far, no published peer-reviewed study has identified any electromagnetic or other energy source coming from the object itself. In other words, while the reports from the oceanic team are well known, there is still no scientific evidence proving that the object itself caused the equipment failures. And that leaves one important question unanswered. So what is actually happening in this place? The truth. After years of investigations, dives, sonar scans, and laboratory testing, scientists still haven't been able to determine what is actually happening at this site. But over the years, various theories have been proposed to explain it. Let's go through them one by one. The first theory is also the simplest. It says the object is nothing more than an unusual glacial deposit. During the last ice age, massive glaciers covered much of northern Europe. As they slowly melted, they dropped huge rocks and other material onto the seafloor. According to many geologists, that's exactly what happened here. They argue that the object is simply a large rock formation left behind thousands of years ago. From a distance, sonar images and blurry underwater footage can make ordinary rocks appear far more symmetrical and structured than they really are. It's a simple explanation, but it has its problems. It doesn't easily explain the reported 300-meter trench behind the object. It doesn't explain the straight walls, sharp angles, or the circular opening surrounded by a square rim described by the dive team. And it also leaves questions about the basalt fragment that was found among the collected samples. So, while the glacial theory explains part of the mystery, it doesn't explain everything. The second theory is a meteorite impact. At first, it seems like a good fit. A meteorite striking the seafloor could create enormous heat and leave behind a long scar in the seabed. That would help explain the trench. But once again, there are problems. Meteorite impacts create craters. They scatter debris in every direction. They destroy. They don't usually leave behind objects that appear to have straight walls, sharp corners, and corridor-like features. So, the meteorite theory explains some of the evidence, but not all of it. Then there's the third theory. It's by far the most controversial, and it's also the one that has attracted the most public attention. This theory suggests the object may once have been something technological. The idea is based on a process that already exists in nature. Think about a fossil. When an animal dies, its soft tissues eventually disappear. Over thousands or even millions of years, minerals slowly replace the original material, preserving its shape inside solid rock. The fossil isn't the original animal. It's a stone copy of what was once there. Supporters of this theory suggest something similar could have happened here. Not to a living organism, but to a structure. According to this idea, the object may once have been built from ordinary materials. Then, after some catastrophic event involving extreme heat, those original materials slowly changed over time until only a mineralized shell remained. If that were true, several pieces of the puzzle would begin to fit together. The unusual geometry would make sense because the structure had been engineered from the beginning. The signs of extreme heat would fit because whatever destroyed it exposed it to very high temperatures. The long trench could have formed if the object had been dragged or pushed across the seafloor with tremendous force before coming to rest. Some supporters even argue that the reported equipment failures could be explained if the object somehow retained properties from whatever it had originally been. However, this is not a mainstream scientific explanation. Most geologists consider it highly speculative, and there is currently no direct evidence proving that the object was ever an artificial structure. There is one more possibility, and in many ways, it's the most cautious one. The object may simply be a natural formation created by several geological processes acting together in ways scientists don't yet fully understand. Pressure, ice, erosion, mineral deposits, thousands of years of change. Together, those forces might have produced a shape that only appears artificial because the human brain naturally looks for familiar patterns. There have been many discoveries that initially seemed impossible to explain. But as more evidence became available, scientists eventually found ordinary explanations for them. The face on Mars was once thought to be an enormous carved monument before higher quality images revealed it was a natural rock formation. The Giant's Causeway was once believed to have been built by giants before geology explained how it formed from cooling lava. And the Moeraki boulders in New Zealand inspired countless theories before scientists showed they had formed naturally over millions of years. The Baltic Sea anomaly could still turn out to be one of them. But for now, no one can say for certain. Whether it's a strange but natural formation or something far harder to explain, one thing is clear. Even with modern sonar, deep-sea robotics, and material science, there are still places on this planet we don't fully understand. So what do you think is really sitting at the bottom of the Baltic Sea? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Also, subscribe to the channel, because we've got more stories like this coming your way. We'll see you in the next one.